how flexible is this person? How much do they need to, how much can they kind of let things go, and how much can they kind of step in when need to be? And ultimately, it's about how much do they understand themselves and how much can they trust what's happening around them in order to know when they need to step in and when they don't. And our relationship with control and how we handle the unknown is established in our very early days, right?
Welcome, welcome back to Before You Do with Verlyn. I'm your favorite host and premarital coach. And today we have a very special guest, Mrs. Lisa Chin, in the studio. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, we're talking about marriage taking more than two people and what that looks like. And we're not talking about polygyny. We're just talking about, well, I'll let you go ahead and you get started and tell us why you say marriage takes more than two people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we aren't just solo beings, right? We are connected to those who are come before us as well as those who come after us, if that ends up being the case. And so when you join in partnership with another person, there's always going to be other people in the room in one sense or another, whether that be spiritually or energetically or physically. You can't actually avoid that. So it's important to recognize that it's not just one and one coming together. In a lot of cultures, it's very much seen as families coming together, histories intertwining. So it's really not quite so simple as a 1 plus 1.
Okay. So when we spoke before, you said that a person should understand how their partner or their spouse is with relationships. Please explain what you mean by this and give us an example.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to understand. I don't think a marriage should just be, I mean, I can spend days on end with my husband. And we'll go on vacation together. And like in the past, before we had kids, we would go on vacation together for like 10 days, 2, 3 weeks, and we would enjoy each other's company. And that is one part of being with another person. But at the end of the day, you can't just be happy with, well, I don't know. I can't just be happy with just being in relationship with one person. And again, we're talking about friendships, familial relationships, even co-working relationships. It's really important to understand how each person works with that. You know, I'm very much someone who likes having a broader network. I like meeting other people. I really get filled up by that. Whereas like my partner, he's not quite in the same vein, and I'm not going to be here talking about him. So, but it's really important for us to understand how we see relationships, what we value in them, and also understand that we need to be able to turn to other people when we have issues with our relationships. And in this culture, I feel like stereotypically women tend to have broader networks of people and men have less. I mean, there's this male loneliness epidemic happening, right? And that is just a fancy word for saying that men need friends. And we need to understand, like, what does that actually mean to each person?
Yeah, I get that. I'm an introvert, but I still understand that my husband is not my whole world. I still have a few friends. I'm an only child, so I don't have all these siblings. I have some distant cousins. But yeah, I can understand that. I talked in podcasts before how when you have your sister circle, you don't have to go to your husband for every single thing, every single problem, and just be a constant burden because you don't have anyone in your network. So, yeah, I get that 100%, especially when it comes to raising children, but we'll talk about that a little later. Now, you mentioned knowing how your partner handles bringing other people into your circle. Why is that important?
I think it's an element of that is a reflection of how important community is to your partner. So if they are comfortable bringing people in that and also allowing you to bring other people into your circle, then that's a reflection of if they value community, if they understand that, you know, you are really stronger with other people within your circle and broadening it rather than feeling like, oh, that's going to weaken our relationship and our link.
Yeah, I think it would be strange if a person did not want other people involved, if they just wanted you to be isolated. I would maybe even think that that might be a red flag. If said my whole world revolves around you and I want your whole world to revolve around me. Let's get up and move. across on the other side of the world so it can just be you and I. I don't think that that will be a good thing per se. Why be disconnected from all of the people who essentially made you who you are, the person that I decide I want to partner up with? Okay, so what does a person need to know in terms of delegating meaningful tasks in the marriage? Which I believe that that can be tough, especially for women, but you go ahead and answer that.
It is a fine line of owning the things that you're good at and then allowing someone else to own the things that they're good at. And I had recently had a conversation about this. And, I have conversations with my female friends about this a lot, right? Because there is this idea of how much of ownership do we take in our lives. And it's important for us to not disempower our partners. I think that, when I became a mom, I was like very much, I'm the mom, I'm going to take care of all these things. And I really ended up disempowering my husband. He had this opportunity to step up and become a dad. And I really took that away from him. And that's something that I feel like I continue to feel the effects of that. I don't want to say I paid the price for it or anything like that. It is something though that I can see, like, if I had empowered him, if I was able to trust him in for him to be able to figure it out and also trust him to do things his way, we would all be in a better place. Like, things would be very different. Not that he's a bad dad, not that, not that parenting is a terrible misdelegate or anything like that. It's just that it would be different. And that's something that I tell a lot of new parents is make sure you understand that there's more than one way to do something, and that even though if you feel like, oh, you have this like motherly intuition, you don't disempower your partner in the meantime because they may have not had that opportunity to develop that intuition throughout their lives, or they just have a different way of doing it, and their relationship is meant to be different than your relationship with your child.
You raise a lot of good points. I think that is common, especially when you have a new baby or things that relate to being in the home. It's so funny because you want help, but if you're like me, you're saying that you want something done the right way or you want it done a specific way. And that way, again, you hit on it. It's not necessarily the right way or the only way. It is just a different way, and sometimes just finding that balance because how that also comes back to haunt you if all you've done is say, "Never mind, I'll do it," and then you find out 5, 6, 7 years down the line you learn that nobody wants to do anything because you have taken all of the burden on yourself. You didn't delegate. And now you find that you could possibly be disenchanted by the fact that nobody helps me around here. You don't do this. Well, when we tried, you said, no, I'll do it. Or when we tried, you said, no, that's the wrong way. This is the right way. And again, like I mentioned, I'm an only child. And so that was a tough lesson to learn that there is more than one way to do things. You don't have to just do it a certain way. And what you said about not empowering, that is huge. It can actually be discouraging when you try to help and you do something and then all you hear is that's not right or that's wrong. Or if you do like me, and it's so funny, my husband may do something and then I may go back and redo it and he could tell that I've redone it. We laugh about it now, after 19 years, we've grown a lot. But it's funny when you think of how you really do have to see how people delegate and whether they can. And then if they do, if they truly let it go and let the person just be. We had grandchildren here a couple of days ago, and she was 4. She was trying to put on her dress, and it was inside out and upside down. And I told my husband, just let her do it. He wanted to go do it. I said, just let her do it. Let her figure it out. And she did. She fixed it and she put it on. She said, I did it by myself. She was so happy, and it was backwards. I said, leave it. It's not hurting anything. Just let her feel empowered. Let her feel accomplished. And she went about her day. Who cares if it's on backwards? She got it on and she figured it out herself. And sometimes, even though that's a simple analogy, we have to do this with the grown people, not treat them like children, but let them work it out. And if it doesn't kill anybody or fall apart or blow up, we're good.
And the other side of that is also just trusting that they
Mm,
can do it, right?
mhm.
So it's like letting go and also recognizing that like they are competent people and that this partnership requires a level of trust. You're not going to be able to manufacture that. It really has to be built through action and through time.
Yeah, that can be challenging. I'm one that doesn't like to work in teams. All right, Lisa Chin, tell us about yourself.
I am a wanderer of occupations and identities all the way through. You're catching me on a day where I'm like, I was writing this morning, I'm working on a book, I'm going tomorrow to see a doula client. I just finished a contracting job as an analyst. So I kind of walk between worlds and I write through it. I would say that through and through, that's kind of my medium of choice. And I love people, I love understanding the way people are. And I've brought that in through my coaching as well as my doula work, as well as my parenting, both for myself and for my children.
Great, great. Okay, so this is really important. How are they in terms of control? This is something that you said needs to be seen. And what I wanted to know, do you mean in terms of just control, period, being controlling? Just speak to that,
Yeah,
please.
I'm actually writing a book right now. It's gonna be a short book. I'm trying to keep it manageable for myself, but it's on the element of the unknown, particularly around birth in the early days of parenting. And when you have it, when we have a relationship with ourselves, really, where we need to feel like we have a hold of things, it can go sideways pretty quickly, right? How flexible is this person? How much can they kind of let things go? And how much can they kind of step in when need to be? And ultimately, it's about how much do they understand themselves and how much can they trust what's happening around them in order to know when they need to step in and when they don't. And our relationship with control and how we handle the unknown is established in our very early days, right? Like I think about my birth, my, childhood, my days in elementary school, like that time frame is really where those ideas get established. So why do they, if they feel like they need things a certain way, why do they feel like they need things a certain way? Sometimes I feel like when we see our partner kind of through the eyes of, okay, they're this way, why are they this way? We can approach things with a level of compassion that enables things to shift. I'm not a relationship coach. I will never be a relationship coach. I very much work in the singular, but I really do believe that we have the ability to influence people and give them space to expand and grow. And when I think of people who are hyper controlling or super passive, there's opportunity for them to kind of bounce back more towards the middle, right? And that requires that space, that understanding, that recognition of like where it may come from.
Okay, so in terms of controlling, delegating, and all of that, when a couple doesn't have a support system in place where you can call on someone else to help, what can happen?
Yeah. So, there was this interesting thing I learned a couple years back now about Maslow's hierarchy. Are you familiar with that? Maslow's hierarchy it's diagrammed as a triangle and you have your physiological needs on the bottom and then your safety needs, right? So that triangle was never actually created by Maslow. It was created post mortem by one of his colleagues. And Maslow actually did recognize all of those various needs that are on that triangle. And he did it by visiting an indigenous tribe in Canada. I believe it was the Siska tribe. And he observed them and he realized that these are all these different needs, but what it was bolstered by community. So self-actualization was not this pinnacle version that we want to put in Western society. It's actually everyone is self-actualized when they're born, right? And then the community, because the community is around to support you physically with your physiological needs, with your safety needs, with love and secure, with recognizing an individual for who they are, then that actually establishes self-actualization from the beginning. And when I'm thinking about your question, it's really the bringing like the ability to bring people in and bolster that. It's not about delegating, it's about understanding how other people can help and how that it's meant to be a shared task. It's not meant to be something that just two people work on. Parenting, this was my big realization when I became a mom is it takes a village, and the village exists not just for parents, but it exists for kind of through all the different life cycles that we have.
Okay. And so if a couple does not have this support system, what can happen? Like, what can be some of the negative effects?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of psychological terms for it, right? But you can become overly dependent. You can just also get into a cycle, right? Like to me, I'm very data driven, so I like learning about other people. I love bringing other people into my life to like understand how they are because it helps me understand myself better. And if you are isolated from other people and you view those relationships as opportunities to grow and you don't have those kinds of relationships in your lives, you are just going to keep on being the people you were when you first met. And those things that, you found cute in the beginning, they turn into those things that tick you off later on, right? Um, and I met my husband college orientation. And I joke that like it was almost like an arranged marriage, but not in the sense that like we were together right from the beginning. But we have grown very differently over time, and we have allowed each other space to do that. And the only way that has happened is, at least for me, I've been able to open myself up to other people and to bring those new ideas in. And there's been a lot of self healing, a lot of work that has allowed that. And if you don't do that, you get caught into these cycles where you are going to continue kind of doing like the Groundhog's Day thing, right? Like you come home, you have the same conversation, you do the same thing, you have the same argument, you go to bed mad, you wake up and do the same thing over and over again. And that sucks.
Oh my goodness. And yeah, not to mention the fact, like you said, you stop growing. You continue the same way all the time. No new information, nothing new to share. And that, in a sense, can lead to boredom and being overly dependent. And you don't have anyone else outside of yourself or your partner to bounce ideas off, to even hear a different opinion, you know what I mean? And that's how we grow. So, how important is it to know what your partner would do in acute situations?
It is very important. You want to know you can trust someone, right? Like as you said earlier, if you don't like an acute situation is when something is happening and it needs immediate attention. Your child falling, the dishwashers flooding the kitchen, like things like that that you can't predict. But can you trust that this person is going to step up? And can you trust that they're going to take ownership? And can you trust also that they're going to see beyond the blame and the shame? There are times when I forget, like the most recent thing that happened, but I thought, oh my gosh, my husband's going to be so mad at me. And then he just kind of was like, oh yeah, that happens. And I was just like, whoa, what was that? And that's a sign of growth as well. Like part of it is just like, okay, like that was my expectation. Where did that come from? Understanding that that is my own internal belief. But yeah, being able to trust someone when, the push comes to shove, like this is going to be your partner. This is going to be the person who's going to be there when such things happen. Like, how are they going to react? Are they going to have your back? Are they going to instead put the blame on you?
That is the test of true partnership when you say, okay, it's understood that you did this, you broke this, you mismanaged whatever, but let's fix this together. Let us work it out. That is huge because usually the person already feels bad because they've done whatever the thing is, right? But then on top of that, to say, I told you that this would happen. I told you not to do this. I told you so, whatever. And then to go through the blame while, like you said, the dishwasher's flooding, while whatever thing is going on, instead of just saying, you know what, let's just fix this. Let's do this. And you need to know how a person responds. Like, are you a panic person? You can't think? Are we 2 people that panic? Somebody's gotta be a panicker and somebody has to be a calm one. Like, you can't have 2 panic people, you know what I mean? You have to have some type of balance, and so, yeah, especially dishwasher, that's kinda minor, but like you said, a child getting hurt, we need to know how you respond. Are you going to be running around the house yelling, or are you going to be able to say, let's do this, let's call the ambulance. In the meantime, don't move him. You need to be able to think in that time. So yeah, that's huge. That is definitely something that you need to know. And the thing is, how do you know? I mean, you can ask somebody, how do you respond in a crisis, right? Or acute situations, but sometimes you don't really know until you actually see it happen, which means you need to date someone for, in my opinion, for a period of time to see how they are in certain situations. It's easy to be in love, get the goosebumps and we feel good about each other, blah, blah, kissy face. But what about when I say no, or we can't do this, or I can't do that, or like you said, a situation, a crisis happens? That's when you see a real person, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we
And
need to see all seasons.
And you can notice in the small things too, right? Like sometimes, knock on wood, right? You don't have a situation that like you're not looking for a situation like that, right? So you're thinking, well, how do I actually see how it happens? And sometimes you don't like you just don't, even if you have kind of inklings of it, even if there are examples from in the past, people change. And sometimes you just have to understand the foundation of the person, and the thing is, if they don't respond like the right, I'm quoting, the right way, there's opportunity for them to change. And I think that's really important, as like if I were to ever give any relationship advice. It is that this idea of change. And as I was mentioning, like having been with my husband for a really long time, like we have both changed as people. And I think that what's really interesting is when someone is changing and the other person is still a certain way, there needs to not be a, hey, you need to change with me. You need to catch up with me. What are you still doing back there, right? Because then at some point, the other person will come and meet, if you give them space, they will come meet you where they, or at least this is my ideal, right? I don't have all the data for it, but the ideal is that you give them space and they're gonna meet you. Then at some point they're gonna go a certain way, and then you're gonna, like that time when something happened and I thought my husband was gonna be mad. That was me being back here, right? And he was up here, and I was like, "Oh shoot, I need to go, I need to catch up with you." And it's really giving each other the room to grow and to evolve as people, and to understand that we're not the better person because maybe we're listening to this podcast and we're being proactive, because we each have our own journeys along the way.
And everything is an opportunity for growth. If we look at it that way, we all have a growth opportunity. I put it that way. Okay, so in your opinion, all these things that we've talked about, and we know when you're dating, you're always looking or you should be watching, right? But when should these conversations start taking place?
My experiences, I don't have much experience dating. My husband was my only my only boyfriend. But these conversations, I mean, they should be peppered here and there. It allows um the formality of questioning feels too heavy um for the first time you have a conversation. So for me, I think it's important to kind of have bits and pieces, and that you're not testing them. You're just going in with an open mind and just kind of just seeing what the status is, right? Because again, people change in 6 months when you ask them, when you want to sit down pre-engagement or something like that. And certainly I would say definitely pre-marriage, and ideally pre-engagement, you have conversations about where each of you stand. I'm sure, there's a lot of resources that you've spoken about on the podcast that point your listeners to different questions to ask and different topics to cover and whatnot. But it is important to kind of get an understanding, and above all, like, just know yourself. Know yourself first, because everything else that you know about your partner is going to be a projection. So if you can know yourself first, then you can enter these conversations without that filter.
It seems like everything always points back to knowing yourself, healing yourself, understanding yourself, loving yourself. Everything kind of points back to self.
And so I'll say that back to Maslow's hierarchy, where his observation of the community bolstering that self-actualization, we wouldn't have to do that. We wouldn't have to heal ourselves, know ourselves, do all that if we were in a culture that actually bolstered who we were from the very beginning. So I just want to point that out.
Say that again.
Yeah, so if we the reason not the that's not the whole reason, because obviously we all have troubles and whatnot, but in this kind of, like, idyllic indigenous culture, the self-actualization is the status quo. Everyone's everyone's in the tribe as who they are. The people who are good at hunting go hunting. The people who are good at raising and rearing children rear children, et cetera, et cetera. The people who are great at art go and be artists. We are in a culture where we are not bolstered by that. We are in nuclear families almost always. There's a lack of community support to rear our children. And through that, our children, also the culture perpetuates an individualistic mindset. So our children and we have, like, I mean, I don't want to speak for you. I grew up in this culture, right, in Western culture, with a viewpoint of like, okay, it's all on me. I got to take care of this. I got to do this thing. I got to achieve this, and I have to put other people's needs before mine. Like all this stuff that wouldn't have existed if I was in a kind of like a village setting where other people were able to take care of things. All the trauma and the healing work that I'm doing is trying to get like trying to undo the work that undo like the damage that wouldn't have been there if I had like a tribe of people around me that were, like I grew up with some trauma around like parentalization, right? I grew up in an immigrant household. I was the only one who spoke English. If I was in a different setting, I wouldn't have to take those layers off of me right now because I would have had people around helping and supporting. And because everyone, all of the rest of the family that was here in the US was in survival mode. Like there was no one, I mean, I mean, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of support. It's just that the support for my specific needs were not met because of that. That's very specific to me. But if we were in a culture where we were able to identify a child and say, hey, you like ponies and you don't like dogs? Cool, right? Instead of shoving a dog in their face all the time and being like, you gotta like dogs. That's just a silly example, but we have those little examples like all throughout our lives. We go to school, we have to sit still. We go to a job and we have to work 8 hours a day doing something that we think is silly and we don't have a voice in the matter, right? But if we were in a situation where we had permission to be ourselves from the very beginning, we wouldn't have as many layers of self-work to get through. Does that
Wow.
make sense?
100%. We can't just be. That's what it sounds like you're saying. Just
Yeah.
be.
And I believe that for the most part, children are born into this world as themselves, right? I always say, like, I'm trying not to break my children. I fail all the time at it, but I'm trying not to break them because I know that they came with kind of their own agenda, their own way of doing things, their own mindset. And how much am I trying to mold them to fit this world instead of allowing them to be who they are and finding their place in this world?
That sounds like another podcast topic. Okay. So when you talk about marriage taking more than two people, are there any deal breakers or red flags?
It is interesting because I'm thinking again, I don't work with relationships, I just know people in relationships. Something that is a red flag for one person may not be for another person. So I think that's really subjective, right? This is a non-answer. Let me give you a non-answer. But I think it's subjective. So that's first and foremost. I think that's important to understand. I think to me, like all relationship advice is subjective. You have to put it through your own lens. You have to put it through your own relationship. You have to understand yourself and your partner in order to do that, right? So there's that. I think that how much hope do you have for the person? And maybe we can't rest on hope, but like I think that there is an element of okay, if there are certain things that you feel like they can change and they're bothering you and you feel like they can change. Oh, this is gonna be terrible advice. We should just delete this. But like, um, but if you feel like they can change, like, and they're not I guess they're not deal breakers. But for me, a deal breaker, it depends on your values and your goals. So if I wanted to have children, my partner didn't want to have children, then that would probably be a deal breaker for me. I mean, it's not just going to happen like that. That's not something that like they can change, like especially with something like that's time sensitive. And your values of like, okay, well, I don't trust anyone who lies. Okay, well, what if they lied to you? Is that a deal breaker? There's so many layers to it. So like I don't quite think in the black and white. I'm very much a gray person. If they lied to you and you're like, that is a deal breaker. Why is that a deal breaker? Is because your dad used to lie to your mom all the time and you think that it's 100% wrong and that's the reason? Well, maybe that requires some examination because maybe they do feel bad and maybe their lying wasn't lying. I mean, there's so many aspects to a story, but really looking at your beliefs and values and what you hold to be true. I got really lucky, you know. I've been in a relationship for a really long time, and I that's why I say I'll never be a relationship coach or anything of that realm because I see so much in the gray that there's no like A plus B equals C. You really have to look at it through your lens and understand what the foundation of your values and beliefs are. And then from there you can decide what is a deal breaker for you and what it isn't. Like I don't bring the fish to people, I teach them how to fish.
Good enough. If someone wants to contact you about your services or anything that you've talked about, how may they do so? And I'm going to have this in the descriptions.
Yeah. Great. So I have two sites that you can find me at. I have lisaforreal.com. That's all spelled out. That's my blog that I write on daily. And I have a couple of services, coaching services on there. And then I have lunarroots.co. That's LUNARROOTS.co. That is my doula, my postpartum doula work. I also do birth rewriting sessions where we go through a traumatic birth and even years later, and we help rewrite that. And so those are the two places. And I'm on Instagram at It's Lisa for Real.
Thank you to everyone for joining us today in the studio, and a special thank you, Miss Lisa Chin. This has been absolutely enlightening. Make sure you like, share, hit the subscribe button, and go over to verlyntarlton.com. Pick up your freebies. I also have a digital magazine. If you are in the process of getting married and engaged, go over to my website. I have a couples vision board template. You can download that and you can sit down and share your vision for your marriage and all of that good stuff. Again, thank you, Lisa, for joining us. And thank you again, audience. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Do you have any closing words, Lisa?
Know yourself, really, at the end of the day, right? Like you said before, that's the most important thing when you're in a relationship is to understand who you are. And so in order for you to be who you are, who you need to be, and not for you to be who someone else needs you to be.
All righty. Thank you so much. From the auntie you didn't know you needed, may you experience extraordinary love.